Bees are marvelous little creatures, the unsung heroes of our planet. For millions of years, they have been diligently at work, performing a task so vital that our world would look unrecognizable without them. This task is pollination. It is a simple, yet elegant partnership between insect and flower. As a bee visits a bloom to drink sweet nectar or collect protein-rich pollen, it accidentally picks up pollen grains on its fuzzy body. When it flies to the next flower of the same species, some of this pollen rubs off, fertilizing the plant. This simple act is the foundation for the production of most of the fruits, vegetables, and seeds we rely on for food. Without these tiny farmers, our plates and our landscapes would be far emptier. The concept of a tiny forest, sometimes called a Miyawaki forest, is a fascinating one. It is a method of creating a dense native woodland in a very small space, often no bigger than a tennis court. The idea is to plant a wide variety of native trees and shrubs very close together. This intense competition for sunlight forces them to grow upwards much faster than they would in a traditionally planted forest. In just a few years, you can have a thriving, multi-layered ecosystem that supports a wealth of wildlife. It becomes a pocket of wildness, a miniature world bustling with life, providing a vital refuge for nature in our increasingly urbanized landscapes. These tiny forests are perfect laboratories for ecological experiments. Our experiment was born from a simple but profound question. What would happen if we supercharged the pollination process in one of these miniature ecosystems? We wanted to see, in a controlled and accelerated way, the true impact of a healthy bee population. The plan was to introduce a significant number of bees, 10,000 of them to be precise, into a newly established tiny forest. We would observe the immediate effects on the flowers, the subsequent production of seeds and fruits, and the knock-on effects on other creatures that call the forest home. It was a grand experiment on a small scale, designed to reveal the intricate connections that bind an ecosystem together, with the humble bee at its very heart. This experiment wasn't just about watching flowers bloom, it was about understanding resilience. Ecosystems are complex webs, and pulling on one thread can send vibrations throughout the entire structure. By introducing such a large number of pollinators, we were pulling on a very important thread. Would the system thrive under this pressure, bursting into an abundance of life? Or would it be overwhelmed, showing us that there can be too much of a good thing? We hope to gain insights into how we can better support our natural world and understand the critical role that pollinators play in maintaining its health and diversity. The tiny forest was our stage, and the bees were about to become the stars of the show. Before the arrival of our 10,000 buzzing guests, the tiny forest was a place of quiet potential. It was 2 years old, a thriving adolescent in forest terms. The trees we had planted so densely, oak, birch, hazel, and wild cherry, were already reaching for the sky, their branches beginning to weave together to form a young canopy. Below them, a layer of shrubs like hawthorn and dog rose had filled in the gaps, their thorny stems creating a protective thicket. On the forest floor, a carpet of wildflowers was beginning to establish itself. We had carefully selected native species like bluebells, red campion, and foxgloves, plants that we knew would provide food for a wide range of insects. The air was filled with a gentle, natural quietness. If you stood still and listened, you could hear the rustle of leaves in the breeze and the occasional chirp of a sparrow or a wren that had discovered this new patch of habitat. A few insects were already present, of course. The odd bumblebee queen, newly emerged from hibernation, would drift lazily from one patch of flowers to another. A handful of solitary bees, like the red mason bee, were investigating nesting holes in our bug hotels. Butterflies, such as the peacock and small tortoiseshell, would flutter through on sunny days. But the overall level of pollination activity was modest, a slow and steady rhythm rather than a bustling hubbub. The plants reflected this gentle pace of life. The foxgloves stood tall, but only a few of their bell-shaped flowers at the bottom of the spike had been visited, evidenced by the subtle marks left by a bee's entry. The apple and cherry trees in our small orchard section produced a respectable but not overwhelming amount of blossom. Many flowers would bloom and fade without ever receiving a visit from a pollinator, their potential to create a seed or fruit unfulfilled. We carefully counted the flowers and developing fruits, creating a baseline measurement. This data was crucial. It was the before picture that we would compare everything against. This initial state was perfectly normal for a young, developing woodland. An ecosystem takes time to build its community of residents. Pollinators would gradually discover this new resource, and their populations would slowly increase over many years. Our experiment was designed to bypass this slow, natural colonization. We were about to fast forward the process, transforming this quiet sanctuary into a hive of activity almost overnight. The forest was poised on the brink of a dramatic change. It was a healthy but sleepy ecosystem, about to receive a very powerful wake-up call in the form of 10,000 very energetic bees. The day we introduced the bees was one of nervous excitement. The 10,000 bees were honeybees, chosen for their sheer numbers and their well-understood social structure. They arrived in several specially designed transport boxes known as packages. These are light wooden frames with mesh sides, containing thousands of worker bees clustered around a small, separate cage holding their queen. Looking at the boxes, you could see a constantly shifting, shimmering mass of life. The air around them was already filled with a low, contained hum, a sound full of stored energy waiting to be released. We felt a great sense of responsibility as we prepared to unleash this force of nature into our carefully prepared environment. The process of introducing them had to be handled with care, both for our sakes and for the bees. We placed several new, empty hives at a sheltered edge of the tiny forest, near a water source and facing the morning sun. Dressed in our protective bee suits, which make you feel like a clumsy astronaut, we gently opened the transport packages. First, we carefully placed the small queen cage inside the new hive. Her scent, her pheromones, is the glue that holds the colony together. Without her, the workers would be lost. Then, we gently but firmly shook the boxes, and a cascade of bees poured into their new home, like golden grains of sugar tumbling into a bowl. It was a truly spectacular sight. A living river of insects flowed into the hives, a swirling, humming torrent of bodies. Not all went straight inside. Thousands took to the air, forming a great swirling cloud above the hives. For a few minutes the air was thick with them, their wings beating a sound that was less a hum and more of a roar. They were orienting themselves, circling higher and higher, mapping their new location in the landscape. This orientation flight is crucial. Each bee was learning the precise location of its new home, so it could return safely after foraging. It felt as if the entire forest was holding its breath, witnessing this sudden dramatic arrival. Within an hour, the chaos began to subside. The majority of the bees had settled inside the hives, clustering around their queen and beginning the work of building wax comb. However, the age of quiet was definitively over. A steady stream of bees was now issuing from the hive entrances. These were the scout bees, the explorers. Their job was to fly out and find the best sources of nectar and pollen. They shot out like tiny furry bullets, disappearing into the foliage of the tiny forest. The air was no longer silent. It was filled with a new sound, a purposeful and energetic hum. The experiment had begun. The 10,000 had arrived. The morning after the introduction, the forest was transformed. As the sun warmed the air, the hives erupted with activity. A constant two-way traffic of bees streamed from the entrances. The foragers, the older, more experienced bees in the colony, were embarking on their vital work. Watching them was mesmerizing. A bee would appear at the entrance, groom her antennae for a moment, and then launch herself into the air with incredible speed. She would fly with a directness that spoke of a clear mission to find flowers. The air, which had previously held only a handful of insects, was now crisscrossed with the flight paths of thousands of bees, each one a tiny, determined agent of pollination. The bees were incredibly efficient. The initial scout bees had clearly done their job well overnight. They communicate the location of rich flower patches to their sisters inside the hive using a remarkable waggle dance. This dance, a series of movements performed on the honeycomb, tells other bees the direction and distance to the food source. We couldn't see the dancing, but we could certainly see the results. Bees were not just randomly bumping into flowers. They were heading in organized streams towards the most rewarding patches, the dense stands of red campion, the blossoming wild cherry trees, and the tall spires of foxgloves. The forest was no longer a random buffet, it was a highly organized harvesting operation. Observing a single bee on a flower is a lesson in focus and design. We watched as a bee landed on a foxglove bloom. She crawled deep inside the bell-shaped flower, seeking the nectar at its base. As she did so, her furry back brushed against the anthers, which dusted her with a fine coating of white pollen. When she backed out and flew to the next flower on the stalk, this pollen was transferred to its sticky stigma, achieving pollination. It's a perfect piece of co-evolution. The flower is shaped to ensure the bee makes contact, and the bee's body is perfectly designed to carry the pollen. Multiplying this single action by 10,000, happening all day long, gives you a sense of the sheer scale of pollination now underway. The bees worked tirelessly from dawn until dusk. Their day was a continuous cycle of flying out, visiting dozens or even hundreds of flowers, and returning to the hive with their bounty. A returning bee is a wonderful sight. Her back legs are often laden with bright balls of pollen, packed neatly into pollen baskets. We saw pollen of all colors coming back to the hive. Yellow from the buttercups, orange from the poppies, and creamy white from the clover. This pollen is the colony's main source of protein, used to feed the growing bee larvae. The nectar they collected was their carbohydrate, their fuel. The tiny forest was providing for them, and in return, they were providing a service of immense value. Within the first week, the most obvious change was to the flowers themselves. The sheer intensity of the bees' foraging had a dramatic effect on the plant life. Flowers that would normally last for several days, waiting patiently for a pollinator to arrive, were now being visited within hours of opening. Once a flower is successfully pollinated, it has done its job. The plant then redirects its energy away from maintaining the flower and towards developing the seed and fruit. As a result, the turnover of flowers was incredibly rapid. Blossoms would open in the morning, be swarmed by bees, and by the evening, their petals would already be starting to wilt. This rapid pollination sent a signal back to the plants. For many species, successful pollination of their first flowers encourages them to produce even more. It's a plant's way of making the most of good conditions. We saw this clearly with the red campion and the wild geraniums. The plants, instead of having just a few flowers open at a time, seemed to burst forth with a profusion of new buds. The forest floor, which had been a pleasant mix of green and floral color, was now dominated by vibrant patches of pink and blue. The entire forest seemed to be blooming with an intensity we had never witnessed before, a direct response to the hyper-efficient pollination service provided by the bees. The character of the flowers also changed. Before the bees arrived, you could find old flowers, ones that had been open for a while, looking a little tired. Now, almost every flower you saw was fresh, vibrant, and at the peak of its condition. The whole forest looked brighter and more alive. The apple and wild cherry trees were a particular spectacle. Every single blossom seemed to be attended by a bee. The trees hummed with a collective energy, and the petals fell like snow in the breeze, not because they were old, but because their work was done. The speed of the life cycle was breathtaking. We conducted flower counts to quantify this change. On a specific patch of clover, we had counted an average of 50 flower heads before the bees arrived. 2 weeks later, the same patch had over 200 flower heads. The foxglove spires, which previously had only the lowest few flowers pollinated, were now pollinated all the way to the top. The plants were working overtime, fueled by the constant attention of the bees. The tiny forest wasn't just hosting the bees. It was actively responding to their presence, leading to a floral explosion that painted the landscape in colors more vivid than we could have imagined. The floral explosion was just the first act. The true test of the experiment's success would come in the following weeks and months, as the pollinated flowers began to develop into fruits and seeds. This is the ultimate goal of pollination from the plant's perspective: to reproduce. And reproduce they did, on a scale that was simply astonishing. The wild strawberry plants, which normally produced a small handful of tiny sweet berries, were now just absolutely laden with them. The ground beneath the plants was red with fruit, a testament to the fact that almost every single one of their delicate white flowers had been successfully pollinated. The trees provided the most dramatic evidence. The wild cherry and crabapple trees had been a cloud of blossom, and now they were a vision of abundance. Every branch seemed to droop under the weight of developing fruit. We compared our initial counts to the new reality. One branch on a cherry tree that had produced 20 cherries the previous year was now on track to produce over 100. The fruit were not just more numerous, they were also better formed. Poorly pollinated flowers can often result in misshapen or small fruit. But with such thorough pollination, the fruits were plump, round, and healthy. It was a perfect illustration of how vital bees are, not just for the quantity of our food, but for its quality as well. This abundance of seeds and fruits was a critical investment in the future of the tiny forest. Each seed holds the potential for a new plant, ensuring the next generation. The hazel and oak trees produced a bumper crop of nuts and acorns. The hawthorn bushes were so heavily laden with red berries, or haws, that their branches bent towards the ground. This massive increase in seed production meant that the forest was becoming more resilient and self-sustaining at a much faster rate than we anticipated. The bees had not just created a feast for the present, they had secured the forest's legacy for the future. We spent many hours counting, measuring, and weighing the harvest. The data confirmed what our eyes were telling us. Seed production in the wildflowers was up by an average of 400%. The fruit yield from the shrubs and trees had increased by a similar margin. It was a powerful and visual demonstration of a simple ecological principle. More pollinators equals more pollination, which equals more seeds and fruits. The 10,000 bees had acted as a powerful catalyst, transforming the forest's floral potential into a tangible, abundant harvest that would have repercussions for the entire ecosystem. The forest was now richer in every sense of the word. The dramatic increase in plant productivity, driven by the bees, sent ripples throughout the entire food web of the tiny forest. An ecosystem is all about connections, and the sudden abundance of fruits, seeds, and insects created new opportunities for many other residents. The first to benefit were the animals that eat fruits and seeds. Almost overnight, our quiet forest became a magnet for birds. Flocks of blackbirds, thrushes, and starlings descended on the wild cherry trees and hawthorn bushes, their calls filling the air as they feasted on the bumper crop of berries. It was a noisy, joyful celebration of nature's bounty. The abundance of seeds on the forest floor did not go unnoticed either. We began to see more signs of small mammals than ever before. Wood mice and bank voles, normally shy and nocturnal creatures, grew bolder. Their populations swelled in response to the glut of food. We set up camera traps and were rewarded with images of these tiny creatures scurrying around at night, gathering seeds and acorns. Even a badger, a creature we had never recorded in the area before, began making regular visits, its powerful snout snuffling through the leaf litter for fallen fruit and nuts. The forest had become a high-energy service station for the local wildlife. It wasn't just the fruits and seeds. The presence of 10,000 bees, along with their developing larvae inside the hives, represented a huge new food source in itself. This attracted predators of insects. We observed a noticeable increase in the number of dragonflies patrolling the sunny glades, their iridescent bodies flashing as they snatched bees out of the air. Spiders, particularly crab spiders that hide in flowers, seemed to be more numerous and successful, ambushing unwary foragers. The hives themselves attracted attention from a local family of great spotted woodpeckers, who tried, unsuccessfully, to drill into the wooden boxes to get at the rich food within. This sudden shift in the food web was a powerful reminder that no creature exists in isolation. The introduction of the bees had a cascading effect, benefiting a wide range of other species. It boosted the populations of fruit eaters, seed eaters, and insect eaters alike. The tiny forest was now a much more dynamic and complex environment. The hum of the bees had become the background music to a much larger orchestra of animal activity. The entire ecosystem felt more vibrant, more interconnected, and more alive, all thanks to the tireless work of our 10,000 pollinators. Amidst all the predictable and positive outcomes, our experiment threw up a complete surprise, a little ecological mystery that reminded us how much we still have to learn about the natural world. In one damp, shady corner of the tiny forest, we had planted a small number of bee orchids. This fascinating flower is a master of deception. Its petals have evolved to look and even smell remarkably like a female bee. This trickery is designed to attract male bees of a specific solitary bee species. The male bee, thinking it has found a mate, tries to copulate with the flower and, in the process, pollinates it. The surprising thing was that our 10,000 honeybees completely ignored the bee orchids. They flew past them without a second glance. Honeybees are generalist foragers. They are not the specific species of bee that the orchid is trying to mimic. As a result, the bee orchids remained unpollinated, their flowers standing as beautiful but lonely sentinels. While the rest of the forest was experiencing a frenzy of reproduction, this one species was left out. It was a stark lesson in the importance of diversity. Having a lot of one type of pollinator is good, but it is not a complete substitute for a wide variety of different pollinator species. As the weeks went by, we started to notice something else. The sheer number of honeybees foraging in the tiny forest seemed to be having a competitive effect on the other, wilder bee species. The handful of bumblebee queens and red mason bees that we had observed before the experiment seemed to be less common. It is likely that the honeybees, with their huge numbers and incredibly efficient foraging, were simply getting to the nectar and pollen first. The wild bees were being outcompeted for food, a phenomenon that has been observed in other studies. This was a crucial and somewhat sobering discovery. Our experiment, while demonstrating the power of pollination, also highlighted a potential downside of relying too heavily on a single species. A healthy ecosystem needs a diverse team of pollinators. It needs the big, fuzzy bumblebees that can fly in colder weather, the tiny solitary bees that specialize in certain flowers, and the hoverflies and butterflies that also play their part. The honeybees were fantastic for the apples and the clover, but they were no help to the orchids. They boosted the forest's productivity, but they also put pressure on their wild relatives. This unexpected twist added a layer of nuance to our findings. It showed that conservation is not just about numbers, it's about diversity. Simply adding more honeybees is not a magic solution to the decline of pollinators. We must also support the habitats and resources needed by the full spectrum of wild pollinators. The silent, unpollinated bee orchid was, in its own way, as powerful a lesson as the heavily laden apple trees. It served as a quiet reminder of the complexity and specificity of nature's intricate relationships, a secret whispered in a forgotten corner of our bustling forest. As our experiment drew to a close and autumn began to paint the leaves of the tiny forest, we were left with a wealth of data and a profound sense of awe. Our small-scale world had provided a clear and powerful window into the functioning of a much larger one. The primary lesson was undeniable. Pollinators are not just a pleasant part of an ecosystem, they are a fundamental engine of its productivity and health. The introduction of 10,000 bees acted like a key turning in a long-stuck lock, unlocking a cascade of life and abundance that rippled through every corner of the forest. We learned that ecosystems can respond to positive change with incredible speed and vigor. The forest didn't just passively accept the bees, it actively reacted. Plants bloomed more profusely, fruits and seeds were produced in astounding quantities, and other animals flocked to the forest to take advantage of the new bounty. This demonstrates the inherent resilience of nature. When the right conditions are provided, even a small patch of habitat can quickly become a vibrant, thriving community. It gives us hope that our efforts to restore and support nature can have rapid and dramatic payoffs if we focus on restoring these key functions. However, the story of the bee orchid and the decline in wild bee sightings taught us a more subtle and equally important lesson: the lesson of diversity. While the honeybees were superstars, they could not do everything. Specialized relationships, like that between the orchid and its specific pollinator, are a crucial part of biodiversity. An over-reliance on one single species, no matter how efficient, can create imbalances and leave other parts of the ecosystem behind. True ecological health lies not in sheer numbers, but in the rich tapestry of different species, each playing their unique role. Supporting honeybees is important, but supporting our diverse wild pollinators is absolutely critical. Ultimately, our tiny forest experiment was a resounding success. It provided a vivid, accelerated demonstration of the immense value of bees. We saw with our own eyes how their tireless work builds a healthier, more productive, and more resilient world, from the smallest seed to the largest predator. The hum of those 10,000 bees was more than just a sound. It was the sound of a healthy ecosystem at work. It is a sound we should strive to hear in all our forests, fields, and gardens. The fate of these tiny fuzzy creatures is inextricably linked with our own, and in protecting them, we are protecting the foundations of life itself.